What's up, my fellow lionesses and lions? Welcome to the Project Lioness podcast, where we are here to disrupt the mainstream narrative when it comes to health, holism, and human consciousness. We are here to share bold truths about health and life from a female perspective. This episode is brought to you by our team, Inspire Co., where we stand for your health being inspired by choice rather than being inhibited by chance. Thank you for being here and joining in on these raw, real, and powerful conversations. We hope our show brings you inspiration and empowerment to overcome challenges, reclaim your life, and ultimately pursue your mission with power, purpose, and play. Now, let's get into the episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Project Lioness podcast. This is your host, Dr. Mel. And today in this episode, actually a couple episodes, I am joined by the amazing Jackie Choury, and she is a dear friend of mine, a dear colleague of mine, and I'm super excited that she's joining us as a guest. And before we get into the content today, we'll talk a little bit about why Jackie's here, what she's talking about as far as money and wealth and finances and some of the things that come with that as far as myths and problems and solutions. But I do want to let you guys know that this podcast is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be more of a longer conversation. And what I mean by that is Jackie's actually coming in and teaching some really powerful stuff when it comes to getting empowered in your finances and money. And so this is going to be a 2-part podcast series. The first part is going to be public to you guys. And then the second part is if you want to dive deeper and actually understand how to work through some of this stuff for yourself, for your own health and wealth and money game, you can actually join the incubator that I'm hosting. I'll put it in the show notes, and I'll put some information about Jackie in the show notes. But part 1, we wanted to make public to you guys to talk about what are some problems and things that people face, get to know Jackie a little bit. And then if you want to go deeper, you can join the Embodied Sales Incubator, which I'll put in the show notes. But without further ado, welcome Jackie to the podcast.
Well, welcome, Dr. Mel. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. And yes, we have been colleagues and friends for some time, and just excited to have this opportunity.
Grateful that you're here. So for those of you who don't know Jackie, her and I met, was it 2018, 2019?
Yeah. It's
something
been a little
like
bit.
That. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
And when I had met Jackie, her and I had met at a really cool workshop experience and, had some really profound breakthroughs in our life. And we just really hit it off as women and as friends, and I would say even soul sisters. I really resonated with Jackie's energy, and we've kind of stayed, in and out of contact for a while. And she was someone who came to mind as far as, and you were someone who came to mind, Jackie, because I'm talking to you and the audience. You were someone who came to mind as, a woman who can really walk the talk as far as helping other people. This audience, our audience of this podcast is not just women, but a lot of them are women, and help walk the talk when it comes to money and finances. And so I wanted to bring Jackie on for you all to talk about, some of the things that people struggle with when it comes to building your financial health. But before we get into some myths and problems, Jackie, I would love to hear, what got you into this work? What is your story? And how did you get where you are today? If you want to share a little bit more with the audience.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. And grew up just, with an incredible mom. My mom was a single mom. We had 4 kids. She had 4 kids. I have 3 older brothers and myself. I went to college, got educated. In all of that, though, I thought about, where do we learn about money? Who teaches us? And I look at my mom, and she did the best she could. And I ask people, where do you learn about money? People are saying, you know what? I learned a little from my parents, but most of the time I learned it from the School of Hard Knocks. Well, that was me.
Yep.
Right? We didn't get educated in the school systems. We don't get educated by the institutions we utilize. And most of us, some parents do a good job, but most of us didn't really learn from our parents because they didn't learn.
Yep.
And so, I ask people, what did you learn from your parents? And most of the time it's, don't go into debt. And I look at my mother, and that's what she taught me. And
Mm-hmm.
I did follow that. Like I was very good with that. But here I am, fast forward and became a single parent, my son Logan. And when he was 3, I'm sitting there going, I I don't understand money. If I don't understand money, how is he going to understand money? If I
Mm,
don't empower myself, I can't empower him. And as in parents, that's the number one thing we want to do is we want to create empowered, adult children,
mm,
not only in life, but especially with their money, because we deal with money every single day, but most people don't understand money.
yeah. Yeah. I really resonate with your story because, Jackie and I were, for you audience members, we were connecting and putting this together before we hit record. And I really resonate with what you're sharing, Jackie, because while I'm not a mom, I also grew up with a single parent. My parents got separated when I was about 4 or 5 and then divorced when I was 10. And my audience members know a lot of my journey. I'm a very open book, and I know you are too, but she was a single parent. And I think the most we ever talked about was the same thing, like, don't go into credit card debt, get a good education, but it's okay if you take out student loans, right? Like that's okay debt. And we'll talk about debt
Right.
in this training, you guys, but very similar, she had gone back to school to get her master's to make more money to support her kids as a single parent. But the most I ever saw was just her balancing her checkbook. And I never really went much deeper than that. I wasn't asking about how to create future wealth. It was just don't go into debt, don't have credit card debt, and balance your checkbook. I don't know if people still balance checkbooks nowadays, but that was my
I think so.
experience. I
Mhm.
remember, and maybe you had like things that you would hear your parents say, but I would remember that my mom would say, Melissa, you have a champagne taste with a beer budget. And that was her mantra to me. That was ingrained in my physiology. And I share that with you guys and share this with Jackie, and being open is that we all have these patterns and beliefs that either we learned or we learned through not learning it. And there's probably some programs and things you have in your mind about money. And Jackie and I are here to really empower you all to help start to dissolve that and help you feel empowered in that process. So just to share on top of what you're sharing too, Jackie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that people don't understand. They think money is a tool, but it's really a relationship. And I think
Mm,
that relationship comes from what you were talking about, how we grew up, because my dad always said money doesn't grow on trees.
yep.
And if I asked for money, he'd take out his wallet and he'd like open it up and make the sound effect, like, and then he'd blow in it like dust was coming out. And I'm like, oh, there's no money.
Oh, yeah. He had the
Right.
whole visual. He had the whole props in there.
Yeah, he had the props in there. And so, we do learn a lot about money from the environment we come up in,
Yeah,
and so I always say, there's emotion around money. There really is a emotion around it. And you really have to dive in to think about how do I perceive money? What do I think about money?
mm,
Right. I had somebody tell me the other day, I hate money.
mm,
And I'm like, ooh, that's a powerful statement,
yeah,
right? To say that they hate money, but it's their emotion around it that created that.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I'm, reflecting on that for the clients that I work with and the people that I serve from a nervous system perspective, right? I think it can be so easy to just take on these thought patterns or statements and not stop, like you're saying, and consider, where did I get this belief from? Like, do I actually believe this to be true, or am I just parroting what I heard from my parents or what the culture says? And Jackie and I are, for you audience and you listeners and people in the program, we're not here to necessarily say what you're doing is right, wrong, good, bad. We're just here to illuminate and say, maybe consider the way that you talk about money, or consider, where did these beliefs come from? Because that, I think, is a beautiful starting point. Is we have to get clear on, what is our mind saying around money? What are our emotions saying around money? So we can start to shift. I always say we can't change something that we don't have a relationship with. And it's being real with yourself and saying, you know what, this is my relationship with it and it doesn't feel good, but I'm willing to change it. I'm willing to get real and say, okay, I'm here to make a shift.
Absolutely. And I think you made a really good point. It's not right or wrong. right? It's just your awareness around it that's going to determine your success in that process, right? And so are you asking those questions? And then you think about that. Okay, what was I taught about money? Now take it one step further. If you have kids, what am I teaching my kids?
Yes.
And the beautiful thing about that is there's fundamentals, there's principles, there's ways to organize it that you can transfer to your kids. It doesn't have to sit in that, I mean, money is a relationship, but it doesn't have to sit in the non-productive side of that, right? You can become more aware and implement some really good things to help.
And we're going to be talking more about that, you guys, in the second part of this podcast, is ways that Jackie has seen has helped her clients and helped people empower themselves. I will probably chime in and support what Jackie's saying from a nervous system perspective. So I think you'll get a really nice holistic approach here. Before we get into more of the solutions, Jackie, what are some of the common, we're talking about mindset and myths, which is a great place to start. We're talking about, and some of you listeners are probably like, yep, my mom used to say money doesn't grow on trees or whatever. But beyond the thought patterns, what are some other problems or myths that you see when working with people or considering working with people when it comes to money? I know you talked a little bit about organization, but let's get into what are some things that you see that these listeners can become aware of that I think sometimes people don't even know it's something to consider, right?
Right. I think the biggest thing that I see centers around the lack of education.
Yeah.
Really not, because families are pulled in so many different directions. Dr. Mel, they get pulled, they've got their banking over here, and they got their insurance over here, and they got their investments over here, and they got their mortgage over here. But the question is how do we bring it together, and how does it impact each other? Right? And really seeing how it all works together for their benefit, right? So just understanding that education about it, right? And then, of course, the organization. I think that's a big one, is how do we organize our money? Believe it or not, that's probably one of the biggest things that can contribute to being successful in money. And I think that, I look at families, and this is kind of an interesting thought here, Dr. Mel, is that people say money is number one, but what I find is that it's what money can buy that's more important.
Yes.
Right? Their values center around what money can buy. So you will always find money for what you want. But what I find is that people still have, not enough money for everything, but they find it for what they want. So if you organize your money and have a system to organize that money, you're going to find that you're going to be on track, for financial independence.
Yeah.
So I think education and lack of organization are probably the two biggest things. And of course, inside that is, how do you get rid of debt? What does, and we talked about this a little bit, there's good debt and there's not so good debt.
Yeah.
And of course, credit card debt, if you're just buying things frivolously and you're buying things you don't really need, but you want, that's probably not the best debt.
Yeah.
But if you have a mortgage or if you have a car, that debt serves you in a capacity. But I think people have a thinking about all debt is bad. And so they fight to pay off their debt, but they don't save for the future.
Yes.
Sometimes it's one or another. So you want to be able to do both at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you speaking to that, because it's really important and we reflected on this, for people to really know, what are your values? What do you want in life? And I think when we can get so myopic in our focus, so fight or flight, it's sometimes hard to see that future where you're just getting by. And for you listeners, what Jackie's speaking to is when you start to create organization, it allows your nervous system to relax a little bit, where you're not just in this gripping state, probably from some experiences in childhood, let's be real, but it allows you to be like, okay, I've got something set up a little bit. Now I can actually open up my system and my brain and my body to consider, what is it that I actually want? Right? And why is this important to me to start to funnel my currency or my resources towards this while simultaneously paying down debt, whether you perceive it to be good or bad? Either way, debt is there, it can serve you. But I'm really grateful that, we can talk about this and be real, because some of these topics, when we talk about, what I'm hosting is my Embodied Sales Incubator, and this training will be part of it. But when you start to make sales, or maybe you're in a sales position in your company, you're having an influx of currency and money. Now, what do you do with it? And that organization for me has been a game changer. But I always had this fear of, if I talk about money or I have a relationship with money, especially as a woman, then who am I to talk about that? Maybe people are going to perceive me to just only care about money. And the truth is, as you said, Jackie, beautifully, like, it's not the money, it's the outcome or the byproduct or the thing that the money gets you. And I think when you can know your values and what you want, you can stay centered, you can stay focused and not get caught up in more the emotional buying. Or even my mom's strategy was, well, I'm just going to save everything for a rainy day, right? And she never had any sort of, sure, she invested in different ways, but I saw her like grip on so much as a single parent, where she was terrified of like letting it go towards something. So I don't know if there's anything in that you want to speak to more.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so important, everything you were saying there, because you said, you were talking about the nervous system, calming that nervous system. I think one of the keys in doing that is give your money an assignment. I think that is so important, to give your money an assignment, because what happens is then, and I know I've heard this so many times, where did my money go? Right at the end of the month, where did my money go? It just flew out the window, right? Well, it flew out the window because you didn't give it an assignment.
Yeah.
Right? So what does that really mean is, if you want to have a fun fund, set up a fun fund.
Set it up. Yeah.
If you want to have a travel fund, set it up. And people go, I don't have enough money. Watch what happens when you give your money assignment. Money shows.
Yes.
And you start building from that, right? So even if it's $25 a month, right? Or start with $50 a month. So I give my money an assignment. Right now we're building a new house, and I set up a furniture fund.
Yep.
So that when I have, when it's time to, in 6-7 months, I've got cash to pay for my furniture. Right. So I also have a fun fund. So every month I have a certain amount of money, and that's what I use for my fun. Right. And so that, I think that is probably a key component in that, calming the nervous system and giving you somewhat peace of mind, because you're always chasing the money, but then the money isn't there.
Right.
Right. So if you want to calm that down, give it an assignment.
And that's one small action step that I think anyone can take, even on your own, or getting the education from Jackie and working with her and her team. It's a matter of when you can feel like you're in freeze sometimes, right? You can't fight, you can't flight. It's like, okay, what's one small action step? We're not saying, you guys, you need to go get $1 million and put it towards a legacy wealth fund. That's not what we're saying. We're saying one small action step can change the game for your ability to feel more empowered. And I say the same thing, Jackie, too, with my students and clients. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's $1,000 a month or $10 a month. It's the action and getting in the habituation of the energy flowing. And, I like to bridge the gap between like certain things in the universe. The universe and your body wants organization. Our body tends towards health and order and organization when we actually give it the resources it needs. And money is just another form of energy, right? Our nervous system is energy, our body's energy. So when you create that order and organization, it's almost like the universe is like, okay, cool, here's more. Because the universe wants to be organized. Your body wants to be ordered and organized. So why not work with those laws rather than against it?
That's right. And if somebody says, look, I don't even have money for a fun fund or a furniture fund, whatever, then start with an emergency fund.
Yes.
Because that alone gives you peace of mind to know that if something happens, you've got that set aside just in case.
Yeah.
Because you can build an emergency fund with $25 a month.
Yes.
Right. and start there. And then you can expand from that
Yeah.
process.
Absolutely. And you and I mentioned this, but I think it's worth mentioning now before we recorded, where, your brain has these different levels. And so it's important to understand that in your own growth, it's important to have these different levels and layers of money where you feel safe, you feel protected, having that little bit of cushion to just relax for a second, have some protection for your assets, right? Which we'll get into in kind of the second part of this training. And then from there, what is your brain or your money doing for investments and ultimately into the future of like whatever your values are, right? But it's okay to have those different layers and levels, and you don't have to go big or go home right away. You've got to have that baseline, protection and security before you go bigger into abundance. Otherwise, things are going to collapse. You're not going to feel that sense of safety to take risks,
Sure. And I think to expand on that, people go, where do I start?
Yeah.
How do I start? Right. And that's something that I specialize in is putting together a written roadmap. So you want to start with understanding where you're at, and then put together the plan to show, how do I get there?
Yeah.
What is my debt freedom date? What is my financial independence number? Right? Those are things that people don't know. They're winging it. And I was winging it. I mean, I think most people wing it because we're not taught about money.
Right.
So you start with getting a roadmap.
Yes.
Right. And so that's something that we offer our clients on a complimentary basis, is a complimentary financial game plan. And then you start from that process.
Yeah. We'll get into that too, you guys, in part 2, is walking through some of these, how money works. Jackie's got a great framework for this to talk about some places to start, where you can go and talk about these different components, building that automaticity. I'm curious, Jackie, you and I briefly mentioned this, but maybe before we get into part 2, would it be worth mentioning, some of the things we've maybe learned when it comes to, let's say, debt or mortgage myths or things like that I know that can get very specific. But you were sharing some things with me that I was like, oh, wow, I didn't even realize that was a thing to talk, kind of wrap up our conversation around like myths and problems before we get into the solutions.
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out for me when it comes to debt is how we as a consumer is approached by debt. And if you look at whether you're buying a house or you're buying a refrigerator, their approach is to sell us on interest rate and payment.
Yeah.
So, right. And that's the thing. They've got us hooked on interest rate and payment when we need to look at, how long we're in the debt for and how much interest dollars we're paying.
Right.
That's the difference. And so if you go look at a refrigerator, they're going to put on the sign, hey, here's a refrigerator. They're going to tell you the total cost, but they're going to show you the payment. $23 a month, $50 a month. And we go, oh yeah, I can afford that.
That seems good.
Seems great. I can do that. Well, what they're featuring is the minimum payment.
Right.
And when they feature the minimum payment, it's going to keep you in debt longer, and you're going to end up paying more interest dollars. So same with the mortgage. They keep you on interest rate and they keep you on payment. But what the mortgage company cares about is how long they keep you in debt for and how many interest dollars they're going to collect from you. Yeah. So if you think about it, there's this rule called 50-25. And what it means is by the time you own half of your house, 15 years, right? You pay in 15 years, 50%, you only own 25% of your home. Why? Because all that time they were collecting debt from you for interest from you, right? They're collecting interest from you. Right. So they come in and go, hey, Dr. Mel, I have a great deal for you. Let's lower your interest rate. And we go, yes, let's do that. But what do they put you back into? Another 30 years. So now they have another 15, 20 years to collect that interest from you. So isn't that interesting? Right? They don't care that you get out of debt. They're looking to keep you extended in that debt as much as possible. Yep. Right? So that's something that I know for me, that was very empowering, because if you refinance, you want to, okay, you can look at interest rate, you can reduce the payment, but are you putting the savings back on the mortgage? Are you reducing that time frame so that it does actually benefit you?
Yes. Yeah. And that was something that when you shared that with me, I was like, okay, my intuition has been guiding me this whole time, because I always felt really like skeptical about that in my own choices with debt and paying things off. But I also like that you guys educate, like, yeah, okay, let's help you figure out this debt thing while simultaneously still having something towards your future too. Because that's where I think I can get really stuck, is like, okay, I have student loans, right? I'm a doctor. I've got doctor level debt. And I feel like I've had a really good relationship with it while I'm still building towards my future. Like, it doesn't, what I'm sharing this to the audience because it doesn't have to be this either or thing, you guys. It doesn't have to be like, I can only, and maybe for some people, it also does make sense, right? And that's where you can talk to Jackie to learn more about your specific case. But I'm the type of person where I like to navigate debt well and simultaneously be building towards my future, because I don't want to necessarily just be focusing on one area. I like to have that holistic model,
Right. And the thing that you have to think about too in that, which is the fact that, debt is always going to be there in some capacity for most people.
Yeah.
So if you just stop to pay off debt, there's going to be a new debt that's going to show up.
Yep.
And then you delay getting set up for retirement again.
Yep.
Right. So you want to be, even if it's a small amount, you want to be putting something away for the future while you're, managing your debt or reducing it or taking on a new debt.
Yep.
Right. So people kind of put it in, once I'm debt free, I'm going to start saving. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Smart.
Right.
Yeah.
Do both.
That's why Jackie's here, you guys. She's got the Jedi mindset of debt. Yeah. And it's so true, right? Like, if you're not having necessarily, like, the form always changes. You may not have necessarily the financial debt, but is there a debt to something else, right? Is there a debt in another form? This was something too when, COVID happened and they stopped all payments, right, towards student loans. Right. I kept paying. I kept putting money towards it, because I'm like, no, I'm not going to play this game. I'm not going to become the victim of like, oh, well, screw the government, right? They're not going to get my money. It's like, they're going to. So why not just have a healthy, balanced relationship with it and continue doing that? And that was one of the years in COVID. We've since surpassed it, but this was before I had a doctor underneath me. 2021 was my best year in practice by myself, right? Because I said to the universe, I'm choosing to do this. I'm going to keep paying it. And the resources showed up. And I didn't have to stop my investments or other things too. It just continued and I expanded into it because of that relationship I think you're speaking to, that you can start to cultivate.
Well, and I think you said it perfectly, and you can expand on this, but it was fair exchange. You were in a system of fair exchange. And when you're in a fair exchange system where you take responsibility for your financial situation, things begin to show up. Yeah. And, you can't, in your own finances, nobody's coming to save, not you, Dr. Mel, but people, right? Nobody's coming to save them.
Well, no one's coming to save me either.
Yeah, they're not coming to save you or me. So we have to be responsible in our financial future, because nobody else is going to do it for us. And we, if you think about it, we deal with money every day of our lives. And we can be a victim to it, or we can be a victor in the process of it. And by getting educated, getting a plan in place, organizing your money, that's taking responsibility. That's in fair exchange, right? And so, we have the responsibility. We take in money. What are we doing with it?
Yeah. Being a steward, having that.
That's right.
Having that relationship with it. And it doesn't have to be greedy, y'all. It doesn't have to be gluttonous. But I love that you mentioned that law of fair exchange, Jackie, because I teach that all the time. And it's there whether you want to accept it or not, right? Like you said, if you choose to just stop paying debt because you're angry or whatever emotion's coming up and you want to say, F this organization, well, that debt's going to show up in another form to get you to balance yourself out. And so why not, again, work with it rather than against it? But you're right. It's being a steward of it. It's being responsible. And we get to change that lineage of what we learned or didn't learn from our parents. We get to step into that and say, you know what? I am often grateful that I wasn't handed all of this on a silver platter. Because here's why. If I've seen, and this is no judgment to them, but I've seen the opposite, where if I was given everything as far as understanding all these things, I wouldn't be where I am today, because I had to sit down like you did with, your son at that one point and say, you know what? I don't get this. I'm going to choose to learn it. I'm going to choose to empower myself. And I wouldn't change that for the world. I'm grateful I didn't learn it because it wasn't handed to me on a silver platter. I chose to learn and grow. And I'm learning things on this call, right? I'm learning things in this, and we get to teach and pass that on to other people.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think you made a good point for even your audience is like, don't beat yourself up if you don't know this. I didn't know it. Be grateful for what you did learn, and be grateful that you have somebody like Dr. Mel that's willing to teach it and help you to empower yourself with that. Right. And because I think that a lot of people will go into that frame of guilt and shame. No need to. Yeah. Man, take charge, empower yourself. The resources are there.
They're there. Mm-hmm. All right, my friends. Well, anything else, Jackie, you want to add to part 1 of this training when it comes to any other myths or challenges you see show up? Otherwise, we can start to wrap this up, y'all, and we'll move into part 2, where Jackie and I are going to start to dissect, okay, what are some solutions? She's going to walk you through some of her framework and how to work with her. But anything else, Jackie, you want to add to this part right here?
I think that I would just say, ask yourself some questions, look inside, understand, what are your thought processes about money? And where can you improve? That's the question. What can you get better at? What can you, what are the things you don't know? Because and sometimes we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yeah.
Right. But, no, I'm just grateful to be here, and I just love the conversation. It's what I love to do.
Yeah, same. Well, thank you, Jackie, so far. For those of you who want to go deeper into this, we're going to wrap up this recording. And if you want access to part 2, I will drop in the link in the show notes. You can join the Embodied Sales Incubator, because in there, we're going to dive deeper into when you start attracting money and wealth in your sales, how do we start to navigate this and give you some of those solutions? So click the link, join us. Jackie and I are going to go deeper, and we'll see you in part 2. Bye.
Thank you for joining the Project Lioness podcast. Did you find value in today's episode? Help us impact the lives of others by sharing this podcast with someone you know who would resonate and benefit from the Project Lioness message. Excited to hear more? We invite you to subscribe on whatever platform you're tuning in on. And we'd be so grateful for you to leave us a review about what you enjoy most, as well as what you'd like to hear more of. Thank you so much for all of your support. Sincerely yours in power, purpose, and play. Dr. Mel with the Project Lioness podcast. Keep rising, keep roaring, and keep inspiring.